welcome to this video and welcome back to Dr. Vibeke Manniche from Denmark. Vibeke, thank you very much for coming back on.
And thank you for having me, John. I'm so delighted to be back. So thank you very much.
And for your ongoing work. You're a doctor and you're a researcher, and you put that together and you have a quantitative team that helps you with this. So you end up with really good quality data, and you've just published a really significant paper. Why should people watch this video, Vibeke, and learn about this paper?
I think it's important to watch because what we show is that women who had a vaccination against COVID-19 before conception has not so good a chance to give birth. They actually gave birth to around 1/3 less children, which shows that there could be some kind of infertility linked to the vaccines against COVID-19.
It really is a lot, isn't it? So vaccinated women had about 1/3 less successful conceptions than unvaccinated women in terms of COVID-19 vaccinations.
Yeah.
And is this data, I was going to ask a silly question then, because we know we can't get this data from the United States.
No.
We can't get it from the UK, but you did get it from the Czech Republic, which has been much more open with its data.
Yeah.
So good that we've got the data from the Czech Republic, but what would you like to see in terms of data releases from everywhere else in the world, basically?
I mean, we would love to have access to data, as you say, from the US, from the UK, from, any odd country, so to speak, because we expect that we will replicate the finding, the signal, which is a very varying signal, because many countries, not only Denmark, not only the Czech Republic, but many countries are suffering from a very rapid decline of birth rates. So it's like the population seems to be dying out, so to speak, at least a rapid decline. And I think what we need is transparency. So we would love to have access to, let's say, the UK or the US. And I think that the public should demand access to these data, because it's so important to have those kind of data and to look into, well, is there a causality? Is there a connection? Or is it just by coincidence, which I don't expect it is, but still we need to have all this knowledge also, so we in the end can, help the women who are suffering or the couples who are suffering and not being able to get a child. And of course also to learn from it and going ahead, what we should make clear before vaccinating a whole population, which actually has been the case. And I think in our study it's interesting because it's 1.3 million women in the childbearing age, and 70% of these women actually had at least one vaccine against COVID-19. And the truth is, none of them actually needed that injection. So if it was like, all right, it would save them from dying, well, okay, then you could understand it. But actually, they should never have had that, what you could call an experimental injection. And now when you see the outcome, and here that there's a risk that probably some of them may have for life changed their fertility. We still don't know whether it's going to go back to normal or it's going to stay a problem, because we need data from a longer period of time. But still, this has been, let's say, 2 or 3 years taking out of their life, where they certainly, some of them couldn't have the child they, probably wished for. So I think it's quite a varying signal, and I think the public has the right to get access to these data in other countries than the Czech Republic.
I mean, we've got the personal tragedies here of couples who can't have children, but we've also got this phenomena of falling birth rates in pretty well all Western countries of the indigenous population.
Yes, more or less. And there seems to be a connection in the countries which has had a high degree of vaccination rate. There seems to be a connection also with the high degree of vaccination rate and the decline of the birth rate. So, I mean, one thing is that what our study shows, which is the first of its kind, which has been published with peer review and everything. So my expectation would be that we could replicate it. But then again, that's what science is all about, that we need to replicate. So it could be, and I don't know, I'm not expecting it, but it could be that, let's say in the UK it was the opposite, or in the US. That's why we need, as Robert Kennedy calls, good science. We need science and independent science to show these patterns, to show these signals, and in the end find out how to help the patients, how to make sure it's not gonna happen again, and get the knowledge so we can proceed in some way or another. So I think it's important, and I think our study is very, very varying, and from a personal view, I'm quite concerned whether it will get back to normal or if it's damage for life. That we don't know.
I mean, we're talking about a massive reduction in fertility of the population, the endogenous population of pretty well all the countries in the Western world. This couldn't be more serious.
No.
The implications for families and the implications for the future of Western civilization are immense.
Exactly.
And through that global future civilization. And yet we're not allowed the data. We've got people like you just waiting to analyze this data with teams of skilled people to do it. And the data is just not allowed. It's almost as if the release of data or the secretion of data is being controlled. Of course, we can't possibly comment on that, but a lot of people are concerned about this.
For sure, someone don't want us to have the access to data, and at one point you can vary: are the data still available, or have someone deleted some of the data? That we don't know. But what worries me in what we would call democracies is that if you have a democracy, of course you have a right to have transparency, because these are data from you, me. Well, I'm not that fertile, and you're not a woman in the childbearing age. But still, I mean, it's public data. So we should have public access, and we should have transparency, and also, as I said, independent researchers, because we are a group of independent researchers. But as it is today, it's much more difficult and has been for us to have our studies published than for some of the studies which were positive for the narrative, so to speak. So I think this shows not only varying findings concerning infertility linked to the vaccines against COVID-19, but it also shows that we don't have the transparency we need, and we need access to these data, because, as I said, I think the public has a right to know all this.
It's almost as if we've got two-tier publications, isn't it?
It is, yeah, for sure.
Two-tier is quite a common issue at the moment in the UK. A lot of people are talking about various things that are two-tier. And we seem to have a two-tier in terms of publications. And I didn't plan on saying this, and we won't talk about it in detail, but certain regimes in the past in Europe have promoted selective breeding programs and eugenics. And if there's any possibility of influences on the reproduction of our young men and women, this just couldn't be more important, and we have to be really careful that no mistakes that have been made in the past in terms of selective breeding and eugenics are not made again.
No, and that is the thing, and of course that is the frightening bit. Is this by coincidence, or is it something which has been done in purpose? And I don't know any of it. I can just see that the result is that there is some kind of negative association between fertility and having had a vaccine. But whether it was deliberate or not, that I don't know. But if you go further into that, you also know that there's something about who takes the vaccine, who doesn't, which social class take the vaccines, which doesn't. There's a lot of things. If you follow that path, and I'm not going to say we're going to follow that path, because that I don't have any data. That would just be a discussion. But if that was the case, it's of course also concerning because you know that there's a different access to who takes vaccines, who doesn't, who says no, who doesn't say no, who knows, who go and get the information and who doesn't, especially if they want to get pregnant. But
Different
nevertheless,
subpopulations within countries even.
Exactly. So, but nevertheless, I still think whatever the reason was, and I think the outcome is very varying. And going back to what was it all about, and what were they trying to? Because one thing is we are showing things about the childbirth rates, but you could take the opposite, the excess mortality. We also had excess mortality literally on a date, May 21, it all started.
Yeah.
And that's also, what was that all about? Were we too many on the planet? I mean, lots of those ideas and thoughts, which for some...
Or was it the wrong sort on the planet that some people don't want?
Exactly. And there you go again. I mean, were they going for someone, and what was the whole idea of that? And that... Yeah. I'm not the right to answer that question, but all I can say is that certainly the impact of the rollout of the vaccinations had many very bad results, and one of them was excess mortality. One of them seems to be infertility, but whether it was someone who planned it, I don't know. But another thing which I think is odd when we have all this is some of what people call conspiracy, and that's a conspiracy theory, and people kind of point fingers and all that. Like if you take the geoengineering, everyone has been laughing about the chemtrails and all that.
Yeah,
and
the geoengineering,
geoengineering, and then it shows up that it's actually happening, and
there's a huge budget for it in my country, and it's all done really quite covertly.
There's loads going on, and here in Denmark, which is a small country, but like here in Denmark, the minute you mention it, it's like, oh, there she goes again, then it's like...
we know it's happening.
It's happening, and lots of...
We know it's happening.
Exactly, lots of science is going on, but still, so some of these ideas, it could be conspiracy, going back to why, if someone planned the infertility path, so to speak. But I don't know, but I certainly know that for some, that has been the price of having a vaccine they should never have had in the first case. They should never have had it. They didn't have any risk of getting corona. We know that they didn't do anything.
They would have got it, but it wouldn't have been insignificant when we're talking about healthy young women for almost all of them.
Exactly, and it didn't do anything to transmission and all that. So I think
essentially not, no.
No. So, but then again, I don't know if someone did it deliberately or not, and had planned for that. That could be interesting, but.
Anyway, let's move on to what we do know.
Yes.
You've got data from 1.3 million women aged 18 to 39.
Yes.
And given that the population of Czech Republic, I'm guessing, is probably under 11 million.
They're around 11 million, exactly.
That's basically all of them, isn't it? So,
exactly.
Should we look at this graphic to start off our discussion, Vibeke? What are we looking at? It's a bit confusing. What are we looking at?
That is the graph we're having in our just published study, and which is with open access, so everyone can read it. And what we have to look into mostly is when you look at the graph from 2022, you can see in the bottom the dark blue graph, and you can see above the light blue graph. And the dark blue graph is the vaccinated women. That's the women who had at least one vaccine against COVID-19 before conception, while the light blue and their birth rates, while the light blue is the women who didn't have a vaccine against COVID-19 before conception. And you can see that many more women which didn't have a vaccine, at least one, gave birth, and it kept, alongside in 22 and until we had the data in 23, that's where we don't have data from any longer, that there's this difference keeps being there.
Yeah, and the light blue river is well above the dark blue river.
Oh yeah,
and the higher up, the more the successful births. So we clearly see that the unvaccinated women are having more successful births.
Yes, the unvaccinated women had like a third more living birth given and than the vaccinated women, and we don't know what's the reason. We can get back to that in a second, but we certainly know that when we look into, we have more data than we have published. But when we look into the data we're having, we can also see that the decline in birth rates, which we see in a second on another graph.
Yeah, maybe just look. Should we look at that
Exactly.
now, Vibeke?
So when we look into the data we're having, we can see that the decline, which you see here from start of 22, we don't see that decline among the unvaccinated women. So it's only in the vaccinated women that we see the decline, which you see here. So if you look at this graph, you will see different countries. We have just plotted different countries and the childbirth, how many childbirths they have had, and then you can see something happens literally on a date, January 22.
All of a sudden, January 2022, they all go down.
And then they have a rapid decline. It's like the same fall. It's like something happened, on exactly as we saw with excess mortality, where something odd happened May 21. Now here we see with the birth rate that it declines rapidly January 22. And
so we see some countries had a falling trend slightly, some had a slightly rising trend, but all of these countries go down.
Yeah, we're now looking into a study where we kind of compare European countries with how the graph is compared to how the vaccine rates. Like, as I said, 70% of this group had the vaccine. In the Czech Republic, they had a high vaccine rate.
Yeah, that's fine. So basically we see this declining birth rate, and we believe that there'll be a similar trend in other countries like the United Kingdom and the United States as well.
Exactly, and that's the expectation, and we want to look into, and some of these data we can have without having access to data in, let's say CDC and so on, and we're now looking into if there's a connection with the decline of birth rates, like the sharp decline, and vaccine, how many women had the vaccine in, let's say, the UK or US, and that's our expectation, that there is a some kind of connection with that number, of course, and we can see that already from the data we're having, and that we're looking into now, and we also think that there could be, or we expect that there's a batch dependency also, that some of this damage done is related to certain batches. That's what we expect, and that's what we have some signals from the data we're having. So there's lots to look into, but as we talked about early on, I think it's so important to have access to all these data.
And your previous study clearly showed a huge difference between the vaccine batch and the incidence of adverse events from that, and not only light adverse events but also serious adverse events. And we're now also working on a study, and in the process of publish that, where we can see there's also a connection with all-cause mortality and the batch you had. So it's quite disturbing, because there was some batches which were given which were much more dangerous than other batches. Yeah. And of course, there will definitely also be some sort of relation to the infertility matter. I mean, and we have some signals also showing that. So, and that's our expectations. And also what I think should be done going ahead, because we can't do the research, all of the research ourselves. We need others also to go into the field. And I think going ahead, obstetricians or gynecologists who has women who suffers with infertility, I actually think they should start looking into the batch dependency, looking into which batch did they have, and kind of find out, was it some of the batches which were given, early on in the rollout, or was it batches given later on? Because I for sure expect that there will be a batch dependency. And for sure they should start making the connection whether the infertility could be a result
of having had the vaccine against COVID-19.
Yeah,
No
I mean,
matter
at the moment, not only are they not looking at the relationship between the batches and the fertility problems, they haven't even recognised the problem of the COVID vaccine and the fertility problems, because the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in my country is still, last time I checked, recommending COVID vaccine for pregnant people, pregnant women. It's just absurd.
It's absurd and it's upsetting, and it's actually, I think it has been very wise in the States to pull the vaccine against COVID-19 for children and pregnant. I actually think they should pull it for, everyone, but that's another story. But still, let's stick to that, because the thing is, you don't have any relevant studies. You don't have any significant studies showing that it has any effect at all in a positive matter on children, and even less on pregnant women. Absolutely. But you do have, Pfizer's own post-marketing, one of their post-marketing report about pregnant women, which came out, I think, September last year, which had almost like 2 years delay. It was a very, very small report. It was a very small amount of women, but even in that small amount of women who had the vaccine in the pregnancy, it shows that there was a higher amount of congenital malformations in the group of women who had the vaccine. You can't make
really. I didn't know that.
No, but it's a very small group, so you can't make statistics. But you can still say, well, what's the point of making a post-marketing analysis like that and don't use the result for anything? So it's like, what's the big deal? So I think it's absolutely crazy to recommend the vaccine both to young, healthy women and men, but certainly also to, of course, children, and certainly also to pregnant women. So at least I think it's wise that they have changed that in the US for now, but I certainly think that they should proceed and also look into, start out with younger people, younger men with the myocarditis risk and all that. But that's another story.
So in future, you'll better do graphics like the graphic that we're looking at now with the declining rates in different countries. This is showing whole populations. You can look at correlations between fertility rates and the number of vaccines on a whole country basis. But the difference is in the Czech Republic, you've got that down to in the Czech data. You've got that down to the individual pregnant woman.
Yeah, and in the Czech data, we had from FOIA many more informations that we could take, like this graph we're looking at. But there would be lots more data we would like to know, because of course you have all this which confounders could there be, and also like, was there comorbidity, or had it something with social classes, had it something with education and all that. There's a lot of things you could look into, and we would love to look into, but still, as we spoke about early on, this is a signal. And when you have like safety signals, which this is, whether you like it or not.
And of course, what's concerning me here is the overt biological effect.
And
yes, there can be effects of lockdown. Yes, there can be socio-economic factors, but the obvious first effect to look at, in my view, when you're talking about pregnancy and reproduction, is physiology, anatomy and physiology, pathological processes.
Of course, and that is the interesting part, because lots of people say, well, what could be the explanation? And I'm like, well, listen, we know from study, and we know from that, we have from Eva, if you show that, we know that some of the side effects women have been hugely reported.
Just tell us what EMA is, Vibeke.
It's actually menstrual bleeding. Well, EMA is the European Medical Agency who collects all the reported side effects from the European countries and put them all together in their database. And
so this graphic along the bottom here, what's this one?
Well, all this, what we're showing now, is some data from EMA, which Wouter Aukema has made the graphs and all that. And if we start from the bottom, you can see that the dark blue color, if you go out in the left side, you see some light gray colors. That's actually the usual amount of reported side effects with menstrual disorders.
This is what we would expect.
That is what it usually is like. You can see very regularly. And then suddenly you have the vaccines against COVID-19, and suddenly you see these big spikes, the blue ones, where you see loads of reported side effects. Coming in the databases. And what you have to remember when you have reported side effects, these are only reported. This were in a time where everyone only were talking about the benefits. None spoke about the risks with the vaccines, and everyone who just dared to talk about risk, with the vaccines were censored and smeared and all that. So this is despite the whole atmosphere around the vaccines, where literally someone called it a gift from God and all that. Still, there were reported these side effects. Just to tell you that it's probably only 10%, probably even less.
Yeah, I would say 10% is the absolute maximum I would expect.
Certainly, and even more for this medication or this vaccine.
So it's not unreasonable to assume that the actual rates were 10 times higher than
10 times higher, for sure. And that we know also. If you ask women who had in the childbearing age, because this is menstrual disturbances, loads of women had the menstrual disturbances. And then when we look up above that, if you go up and look up, on the right hand side, on the right, that one, there you can see the big round ones is the ones with the most biggest numbers, and you can see that from the numbers also. So 38,000.
So we've got menstrual irregularity, menstrual bleeding, menstrual disorders, menstrual bleeding.
Exactly. And most of them had the heavy menstrual bleeding or the menstrual disorder or the menstrual irregularity and so on.
Or menstrual delayed.
And menstrual delayed. But anyways, problems with the menstruation. And that just shows that if you have menstrual, disorder of some sort, or at least not the regular menstruation, then of course it will have an impact on your fertility. And
of course, even I know that.
I think you could ask a small child about it, and of course you will have. Certainly, it's not making your fertility better. That's for sure.
We could certainly ask any teenage girl. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. And another thing is, these women actually, were so suffering from these problems that they actually made the connection, and that's going back to. Even more did have the problems. And there you go. So you have it, as I say, up in your face. You have these pattern, huge numbers of women who has been reporting their menstrual bleeding. We can see that also in data on a national level. We see that on our study on batch dependency. We saw that also on Sweden. So we see this pattern. And for sure, if you have menstrual bleeding, you have a fertility problem. What we don't know is whether some of these menstrual bleeding who has been reported has disappeared again, or if it's a lifelong disturbance. That we don't.
This is the really concerning thing, isn't it? Is there some women that are now subfertile or infertile?
Exactly.
For the rest of their lives as a result of this.
Could be.
We don't know that yet.
Or at the time of their life, because this is at least 2 years going ahead, 2 years along.
That's right. Reproductive years are relatively short. We don't get many people in the late 40s having babies, do we?
No, exactly. So this could be in the end of the fertile period that it's gone. So it's not like you can just wait another 10 years and, there it is. Well, here we go again. It's gone forever.
In fact, but personally, I don't know any women that have had babies older than. I think that the oldest one I know personally is 44.
Yeah, that's another thing. Then we have the stories about someone my age, but you're right. But still, I mean, and that's why we know that the fertility is declining rapidly after
Yeah.
the age of actually 30. Well, it's
I've actually talked to midwives who I think one midwife I talked to had a natural conception at 48,
oh
but
yeah,
but
well done.
it's very rare, very
I
very
would say
rare.
so. And then you go again. So it's a small period of time already today where women wait to get pregnant,
Yep.
lots of women wait until they have had their education and all that. So let's say they start out at the age of 30, and let's say at least 38, 39, then it's good luck, so to speak.
I mean, fertility rate's going to drop off after even early 30s. Fertility rates
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And,
drops quite a bit.
I think it starts dropping even at the age of
Yeah.
24 something.
And
But at least it's
you
not
get more and
getting
more
better.
anovulatory cycles where there's no ovum
Exactly.
released.
Exactly. So there you go. So it's like it's a small period of time already, and you're already taking 2 years out of that, and it's not 2 years coming back later on.
That's
So
right.
for
That's
some
right.
women, this is definitely for life. And then let's cross fingers that they had a child or two before, but some will stay
Yeah.
childless because of the vaccine. And I think then
Yeah.
going back to should they ever have had that vaccine, and the big answer for that is no.
And if they were given informed consent, if they were said, "Well, have this vaccine," and
Exactly.
but it might mean you never have children.
Yeah, how many would have said, "Oh yes, give me two while you're at it,"
Yeah, I mean, if that was the case and they decided to do that, then
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
informed consent. But that's the point, that was not done.
No, and there you go again, and that's why I think it's so important that people were lied to, people were harassed if they didn't take the vaccine, people were fired, people were kept out of social events and family events and all that. And I think and at the same time, the authorities were holding back the data because going back, looking at these data, you can see that this is actually data EMA has been collecting from 22. So the
Yeah,
data has been there. We have just published it now.
this data was on someone's spreadsheet in 2022.
That's the thing. That's the thing. So someone has been sitting there watching these data, going ahead, and none did anything. And at the minute they saw this, like the same I have with myocarditis, that the minute
Yep.
that they saw that there was some kind of connection, women should have been informed. Women should have,
Straight away.
when they
Absolutely.
started the rollout and all that. So at least when they had the menstrual bleedings and disturbances, women should have been told, had follow-ups and all that. But instead, it has been silencing. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to write about that. I mean, listen, John. None from mainstream media has mentioned our study. None. And
Which is why it's so important for us to do it.
exactly, that's why it's so important. But it has an impact on everyone in the Western world. And it's like none. And there you go back to the censorship and someone lying and pretending that it's not happening, which is, as for me as a citizen, a concerned citizen, so to speak, I think it's so upsetting and a disgrace for democracy and a
It
disgrace for
is, and
science.
if this causal connection is true, I mean, and this data applies to all Western countries, we could be talking about millions of children here that don't exist.
Exactly. And there you go again. Is it true or is it not? That's why we need the replication.
Absolutely.
Because when we had the first batch study out, it was exactly the same. We need someone to replicate it. They did replicate our findings in the Czech Republic. We replicated ourselves on Swedish data, and they replicated on US data. And that's why I think it's so important to have, as I say, Robert Kennedy would call it good science, but I think it's so important, and that we build a brick, together instead of just trying to keep scientists away from the data, trying to smear scientists who want to look into the data, and trying to, lock the door so we can look into the data. I mean, you can't imagine all the what they have done for, to not make us able to look into the data. We're very happy that we have the Czech data, but I would have loved to have Danish data. I think it's a little odd. I'm the first author of this study and it's on Czech data. Why don't we just have Danish data or Swedish data or data from...
Why is Danish data not available to you as a Danish doctor? It's just ridiculous.
Because they are holding it back. And they are just denying to deliver the data. So, and that's the same problem we have in Sweden. And probably, I know that lots of people have trying to get data from the UK also and can't get the data. I'm crossing fingers that now with Kennedy as a secretary, I'm hoping that we will have much easier access to CDC data.
Well, we don't have download links as yet, but...
No.
Let's hope we get download links there soon so that data can be peer reviewed by people such as yourself.
Exactly. And just we have uploaded our data, so every scientist who want to go look into it can have access to the data. And I think that's important to share data and look into it differently and try and do statistics differently. That's fine also, and maybe put it together with this and that. That's perfect. That's what science is all about, that we need to have as much as possible. So in the end, we can kind of draw the picture and kind of put the puzzle together and say, okay, that's how it is, or that's how it isn't. So
I must say this paper, to me, is pretty tight. I know it's been peer reviewed, but I reviewed it at pre-print stage. And I must say I couldn't see any obvious errors in the way that the data had been interpreted. I think this is a pretty tight piece of research, to be quite honest.
Yes, and that's what we think ourselves also, because we have good people around the table, so to speak, and we have double-checked. And that's the thing, when you find something which is so disturbing and so worrying, of course we have been even more... eager to look into, make sure that everything was all right, and double checked and double triple checked and all that. And also we wanted to make it not too complicated, because we just wanted to see or show there's a signal. So from that on, we need to look further into causality, look into what could be the reason. But for me, it's up in your face.
The plausible pathophysiological mechanisms in terms of menstrual disturbance are obvious.
I think it's so obvious. So it's
the Bradford Hill,
exactly.
Modalities, mechanisms are just blatantly obvious.
Exactly. So it's like, it's nothing odd. It's not like you sit and say, "Ooh, how could that be?" I think it's so obvious.
Yeah, we're not looking at some minutiae of biochemistry here. We're looking at the shedding of an entire endometrium.
Exactly. But then again, why do women get the menstrual disturbances? That is, of course, the next question. Is it because an autoimmune reaction? Is it because, spike proteins in the ovarians? That is, of course, the next step. But for sure, we can't deny that there is a connection between the vaccines against COVID-19 and menstrual bleeding disturbances. And
that's unequivocal.
Yeah. So
I suspect the mechanism is autoimmunological in some way.
Yeah, I think there could be many explanations. Maybe also the spike protein, and but that I want someone else to look into, because what we are good at in our group is look into big data and look into signals and kind of try and understand what could be the explanation. But someone will need to look much more into the ovarians of these women and search for the damage and what happened. Is it an autoimmune reaction or what actually happened? And I think that's why it's so important to have these kind of studies.
Unfortunately, we've got an outbreak of curiosity deficit disorder in doctors and scientists in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. You can call it that.
Yeah. And these smaller circles are just other adverse events that occurred in smaller amounts. Yeah,
but then again, I think, look at it on the bright side. I can see that there has been with social help, the help from social media and good podcasts like your own, there has actually been a big spread of our results. And I can see also within my own field, so to speak, among other doctors, I think something is happening because at least they are realizing the problems around themselves, maybe in their clinical work or in their families. They are seeing people not only with the infertility, but also with all-cause mortality. They are seeing people dying very quickly. They're seeing people getting rare symptoms of some sort.
The cardiovascular, the neurological, the musculoskeletal,
exactly.
The list is very long. The autoimmunological, the list is very long, unfortunately.
It's so long, and I can see that it's kind of doctors and colleagues are actually wakening up because they can see that in their clinical work. And I can see that some of the studies which coming out is doctors who suddenly see a new pattern, what's happening, and start, putting it all together. And also, I think, going back again to Kennedy, but I think what they're doing now in NIH and what they, saying that you should have easily access to the data and easily access to the studies and again, transparency. And I think that's going to help independent scientists like ourselves, because some of the barrier has been that we couldn't have it published and that it was, unpopular, so to speak, or so I think we're on a good roll, and at least that's what we have to say to ourselves to believe in that something will happen. And I think there's, as I say, or as Leonard Cohen said, there's a crack in everything. That's where the light gets in. And I think that's what's happening these days, that crack is getting bigger and more light is coming in. And in the end, hopefully, we will get access to all these data.
Yeah. So in conclusion, we can say that successful conception rates, that's conceptions that went on to live births, were substantially lower for women that were vaccinated against COVID-19 before successful conception than those who were not vaccinated, and those that were vaccinated had less successful conceptions leading to births compared to what would be expected for the population as a whole.
As a whole, exactly.
And we suspect this is the case in other countries, but for the Czech Republic, we know.
Exactly. And we need transparency. We need the data from all countries, from UK, US, and everywhere. And then we can go and see if it's a sole bird, so to speak, or a lonely bird, so to speak, or if it's a pattern, a signal. I expect that it's a signal which we will be able to find in many other countries.
Well, we've got the pathophysiological mechanisms through the disordered menstruation that mean it's very likely to be consistent.
Exactly.
And I think we should notice, Vibeke, just before we finish, that you're not getting paid for this. You do your regular day job.
Exactly. We all do.
As well as this.
Exactly, and it's actually done in our spare time, and that's another thing. We haven't had
which you don't have any of anymore.
Pardon?
You can't have any spare time anymore.
No, that's right.
This is very exacting work.
That's right. And I must admit, now and then I think, well, is it worth it? But I'm like, now we've been in the field for 5 years, and we have collected so much knowledge and insight and competences within the area. So I think we need to proceed. We need to continue because there's no one else to take over as it is for now. And of course, we're hoping to get grants in the end. We now only have crowdfunding, and actually only crowdfunding in Denmark, more or less. But I think some of the people who realize this is important starts to support studies like ours. And I hope that some of the big foundations and will, hand out grants in the end, because that we need this kind of studies. But you're right, it's in our spare time. So,
and I mean, given the fact that if someone can give you a grant, you can hit the ground running. You've got the expertise, you've got the knowledge. So
we have a splendid group.
Who knows? You might get a big donation from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, or the Wellcome Foundation, or people with lots of money might give you money for this.
You're right. Whoever wants the knowledge to come out, whoever wants, independent research, because also what I've been saying all the time, and from the beginning of the corona scandal, I keep saying, well, whatever the data are going to show, that's what we're going to publish. So let's say it was the opposite, that, women who had the vaccine, they were, giving birth like, all the time. Well, that was the result. Then that was the result who should come out. And that's what independency is all about, that you look into the data with a proper mind, with the right skills and with the right ethics, and then have it published. That's how it should be. So, and I must say that the group we are having is, in my view, very talented and very committed, because everyone in our group is doing that in their spare time. And I think in the end, you can't, of course, continue that forever, because we would like, of course, to have someone who could work on that, well, if not 24/7. So
well, absolutely, yeah.
In daytime, because imagine if we had been able to doing this in our daytime job, we could have even more publications and even more, important data coming out.
Well, Denmark has a proud tradition of resisting tyranny, and you're carrying that on, Vibeke. So
we will.
On behalf of the world, thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
But for now, the links are all there. As always, thank you for your work and thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me, John.